Disneyland is one of my favorite places in the world. What better way to celebrate its beautiful existence than to throw all the rides into the tierless battle ring and see who comes out on top? This will be a ranking from worst to best of all 55 Disneyland and California Adventure rides currently open as of 2021. Everything from Snow White's Enchanted Wish to Web Slinger's A Spider-Man Adventure. And yes, I believe I have been on all of these at least once. Before we begin, let's figure out what defines a ride as a ride. If it moves, it's a ride. Okay, now that we got that out of the way, let's start at number 55. Imagine going to Disneyland and thinking to yourself, you know what I haven't got enough of today? Exercise. I want to purposely torture myself by going on this canoe ride around Tom Sawyer Island. But hey, maybe if I'm lucky, the boat that I'm in won't be filled with children who will get tired a fourth of the way in the ride, forcing me to do all the heavy lifting. Like, if you really want to go around the river, just ride one of the boats. Not only does this ride glorify one of the biggest problems with Tomorrowland, that being that it's become a place for space stuff only, it also just isn't a fun ride and is always much busier than it really deserves to be. I wasn't alive when this ride was on top of the People Mover loading building, but not only does moving it from its height make the ride 100 times more lame, but like, of all the places to put this freaking ride, they put it in the middle of the entrance to Tomorrowland. So now not only do you have to walk around this eyesore every time you want to go on a good ride like Space Mountain, but now you can't even do something as common as watch the fireworks without looking to your right and seeing this hideous creation in front of your eyes. This ride is absolutely unnecessary. Like, I guess it fits pretty well in the vibe of the land, but why on earth would you be willing to go out of your way to go on this ride when it's basically just a bus ride? Like, bro, you already did that today. It's called the Toy Story Parking Lot Shuttle Bus. I'll admit, I'm kind of cheating with this one by putting all of these separate rides into one category, but if the official Disneyland website can do it, then I think I can do it too. This is a little cooler than the trolley because this one's got a double-decker bus and a horse-drawn carriage, but there's still no reason to go on this if you want to have an efficient day at the parks. It works with the vibe of Main Street a little better than the trolley does, and the variety really helps with that. Oh, and this ride is the one that's single-handedly responsible for making it possible to walk through Disneyland and see literal shit on the ground. When I was a kid, I remember saying to my dad, this ride is like the 1-minute nap ride since it's very quiet, and the cast member overheard me and thought it was really funny, so when she lifted off the ride, she said on her intercom, enjoy the 1-minute nap ride, so that was pretty cool. Oh yeah, but this ride's pretty boring, too many spinning rides in one area. Okay, before we get to number 50, you should really consider subscribing. Yeah, okay, cool. I have a personal vendetta against this ride because it used to be Flix Flyers in A Bug's Land, which I have very close childhood memories associated with, but then they changed it to Inside Out. Like, I remember I would always try and get into the cookie box. Dude, I missed that. That was like the height of my childhood. It's sorta cool because it's close to the good Pixar Pier ride, but I will never forget that it brutally murdered something very, very close to my childhood. This ride is boring and unoriginal. Next. This ride is more inspired, but I never felt close to it as a kid. It takes up way too much space in Fantasyland, which is already super crowded. Maybe this is a hot take, but yeah, teacups are pretty boring. There's plenty of better Fantasyland rides. I remember watching a video of people going on this ride to look at the construction of Goofy's Sky School when they were retheming it. Jeez, I must have been like 8 years old. That was a while ago. Anyway, yeah, this one's like Tower of Terror, but for babies. Honestly, compared to even the super old Fantasyland rides, this really doesn't hold up. Last time I went on it, I noticed a lot of flaws with it. Like, you could see the exposed animatronic of Ariel at one point. If you look up in the Under the Sea room, you could very easily see the lights. It's honestly just falling apart. Don't expect to go on this ride and not sit in a wet seat since everyone goes on this ride after Splash Mountain. This was one of my favorite rides as a kid, but honestly, once you learn how to actually drive a car, this ride not only feels insanely uncomfortable, but it's just really frustrating sometimes. I didn't know that this was LA Traffic Simulator. Also, look at all that space they could use for expansion. Like, this ride's basically on its deathbed anyway. Pretty simple ride, not much to say. It's kinda boring, but the mic animatronic is pretty funny, I guess. Last time I went on this ride, it reminded me that Disney movies were pretty freaking dark back in the day. Not much to say about the ride, but dang, they really did turn them into donkeys for giving in to temptation. Like, that's freaking scary, man. Much better version of Astro Orbiter. Fun fact, Harry S. Truman went to Disneyland in the late 50s and he refused to go on this ride because he didn't want to be associated with elephants because it's the animal of the Republican Party, so that's pretty funny. Dollar store version of Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. Unless it's Christmas, I'm not going on this ride, and I usually don't go to Disneyland during Christmas since it's super busy, so yeah, no thanks. This ride may not seem like much, but the trackless technology they used served as foreshadowing for a very amazing ride that we'll get to later on this list. I went on this ride last time I went to Disneyland and I didn't even notice whatever they changed during the pandemic. Cool ride though. Oh my god, okay, I need to refrain from going on a long rant about this frustrating ride. Back in my day, this ride was just over California. Not only is this a better fit since it's in a park called California Adventure, but it also felt more intimate to this California boy because they were forced to get creative about what in California they show since not everything in California is a movie establishing shot recognizable place. When they changed it to Over the World, not only did they get rid of this intimacy by only focusing on movie establishing shot places, but they also added a bunch of really pretentious CGI to like every single scene. And since they had so many fabricated transitions to make the setting changes more seamless, the one time they didn't do it when transitioning from Lau Islands to Iguazu Falls, it really felt unnatural. And unless you're sitting top center, everything you see is going to be bent because it's a circular screen. It astonishes me how much Disney brutally annihilated this ride. If it were still over California, it would probably be in the top 15, heck, maybe even in the top 10. I hate every single change to this ride, and I hope they change it back because all they really have to do is just switch out the video they play. Okay, I guess I failed at refraining from a rant. You know, I like this ride. It's not anything special, and it's probably going to get axed when they do the Tomorrowland refurb, whenever that may be, and I'm not going to miss this ride by any means, but like, it's just such a cute little Nemo adventure, how can you not like it? I'm pretty sure I've only been on this ride like once as a kid, and I remember thinking that it was like a Walmart version of Jungle Cruise. I don't remember much from this ride other than that it's right next to the bathrooms that have the giant deck cards as the stall dividers. Definitely the best bathrooms in Disneyland, right next to the Galaxy's Edge bathrooms. Wait, I wonder if anyone's done that before. Disneyland bathroom ranking? Dude, I should do that. Oh yeah, this ride's alright, I guess. There really isn't anywhere to sit on this one, and the entire experience is just kind of mid-tier when compared to the other boat that goes around the river, but hey, I'll take this over manual labor any day. This is like the baby version of Big Thunder Mountain, but since Big Thunder Mountain was one of the rides I wasn't scared of going on as a kid, I never felt like this ride was anything amazing. It may seem like there's nothing special about this ride, and that's what I thought when I recently went on this last time I went to the park, but after I got off the ride, I overheard a kid begging to their parent to let them go on the ride again. Like, this is most likely the first big roller coaster kids feel comfortable going on, and I think it deserves a little more respect for that. As a kid, I always called this ride Big White Boat, and I still do. I refuse to call it the Mark Twain River Boat. Why the heck is it named after Mark Twain? Bruh, it's a boat, it's big, and it's white. It's the Big White Boat. Okay, we're starting to get into some of the good rides. This ride not only has every parent wondering why this ride ends in hell, but it's also the last remaining evidence of the wartime era in Disneyland. The plate breaking game is honestly a lot more satisfying than it really should be. The only Fantasyland dark ride that's worth waiting a long time for, but not too long. I don't know why, but I seriously can't get enough of this underrated ride. Maybe because if you know that the triangles give 10,000 points, it's easy to get really high scores in just the first room, but I don't know, I feel like this is a lot more satisfying than any other shooter game ride out there. On the surface, this ride may look like nothing, but I assure you that when you actually ride it, it's psychotic. Now that Millennium Falcon and to an extension Galaxy's Edge exists, this ride kinda feels unnecessary. Still pretty fun though. Not as fun as the swinging version, but this one goes higher. Every single time I go on this ride, I feel like I'm gonna fall off and die. Every single time I don't, but that still doesn't stop me from feeling it. Okay, I feel like I've really given this ride a hard time, which is honestly mostly due to the circumstances in which it opened, but I actually think this ride isn't that bad. The motion detection is a lot more responsive than I thought it would be, and the fact that they actually put a pretty believable story to accompany this shooting game is pretty cool. The only thing I can really criticize it for is that since you're constantly moving your arms in an aggressive fashion, the ride really wears you out by the end, which makes it really hard to get a high score. Oh, and unlike some superhero shooting rides, the exposition isn't painfully long or boring. Still overall a B tier Disneyland ride, especially compared to the only other ride in Avengers Campus at this time. This is the only worthy spinner in California Adventure, which is full of spinners. I don't know what else to say, it's just a fun ride, especially if you get a seat closest to the outside. Even though this doesn't go as high as the non-swinging one, the fact that you can roll down a sloped track in a metal cage 100 feet in the air makes this one a lot more fun and terrifying than the non-swinging one. Unlike the Main Street vehicles or the red car trolley, using the Disneyland Railroad as actual transportation can be very useful when your feet are tired. It also holds a lot of history since Walt Disney wanted to build Disneyland specifically so he could have this train. Oh yeah, and the dinosaur thing in between the Tomorrowland and Main Street stations is always a must-see. This right here is the peak of transportation usefulness at Disneyland. Maybe if they added a stop at DCA it would be even more useful, but I can't even begin to tell you how nice it is to eat somewhere in downtown Disney for dinner and then just be like, hey, let's just ride the monorail into Disneyland for the night. Oh boy, now we're getting into the really good ones. Hopefully my writing can do justice for these upcoming rides. Jungle Cruise is a prime example of how to save a ride that isn't working. I talked about this in my Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson cinematic experience review, but Jungle Cruise now is basically just the corpse of an old ride making fun of itself. It isn't an educational ride through the rivers of the world, it's a failed attempt at an educational ride through the rivers of the world that makes fun of the animals and the reality of the situation with puns. Admittedly, it really depends on the skipper you get for this ride to be good versus amazing, but you're always in for something funny when you hop on this ride. Before I learned that Song of the South is a movie, a garbage movie that exists, I remember thinking that everything in this ride was original to the ride, which would have been a lot more impressive and creative than pulling from this very uncomfortably racist 1946 film. Nothing in the ride itself is racist, so it's at least possible to enjoy this ride setting it aside from its garbage film. And it really is a fun ride and serves as a very good water ride for Disneyland, but like, holy crap, what were you guys thinking when you made this ride in 1989 after everyone knew that this movie was racist? Hey look, it's the other Disneyland water ride, the non-racist one. I remember as a kid this was one of the only big rides in DCA I was willing to go on since I was kinda a wimp as a child, so this was always a highlight of California Adventure to me. It's still a lot of fun for me as an adult, but now I have to live with the fear that I'm gonna drop my backpack in the water, so that's fun. I feel kind of bad that this one barely didn't make the top 10 because just like Grizzly, it was the one big ride I wasn't too much of a scaredy cat to go on as a kid. This one is always just a fun ride. You get to go through multiple tunnels and down many hills. You get to watch the dynamite holding the... Wait. You get to watch the goat holding the dynamite until he's completely out of view and then you have to jerk your head forward. This ride has deep childhood memories rooted in it for me and it still holds up very well as an adult. A very awesome ride that is both impressively themed and super thrilling. It's the thing that completes this already very amazing land with this electrifying ride. No, that was not a Lightning McQueen reference. This would probably be closer to the top 5 if it weren't always such a freaking long wait. Like, unless you book it to the ride right at rope drop or get a fast pass for it, which you now gotta fork up $20 per person to do, you probably are gonna have to wait at least an hour for this ride at any given time. This right here is it. This is such a fun freaking ride and I just want to go on it again and again. And since it usually isn't an unreasonably long wait, you can go on it again and again. Last time I went, I got to go on this ride like 4 times in one day. It was pretty awesome. It has such great re-rideability value and the only thing it really lacks in is the theming of it. None of the sculptures of the characters feel realistic and it honestly just feels like they threw these characters into the tunnel so they could slap The Incredibles on the name of the ride. Wait, that's exactly what they did according to Violet.
Sure, slap our names on an old ride. Quite normal, darling. Corporations call it synergy.
Okay, well at least they're self-aware about it. One last thing about this ride is that unlike some roller coasters in California, this ride isn't bumpy or uncomfortable. It feels safe and is always such an exhilarating experience. If it weren't for the lazy theming, this would probably be my favorite ride from DCA because it's definitely the most fun. I can't help but think that Disney sorta jumped the gun with this ride. It opened a year before they formally announced that A Bug's Land was gonna get the axe in favor of a brand new Marvel land. 4 years later, Avengers Campus opens and it kinda has a concept on its own of being a school for the next generation of Avengers. But then right next to it, in the exact same land, there's the Collector from Guardians of the Galaxy's tower, which is supposed to be like far off in space. They kind of fit it into the land by saying that the Collector brought his towered thing to Earth, but it still feels very unplanned. That being said, I love this ride so much. It's easily the best themed ride in DCA, hands down. It's got it all. A compelling story, in-universe comedy, a rocket animatronic, and oh yeah, it's also got the old Harold Yeti from Matterhorn. Yeah, he's there too. The ride itself is always a lot of fun, and I will defend this retheme to the grave. Because yeah, it was sad to see Tower of Terror go, but the party-like tone that this ride adopts works so much better for the thrilling elevator drops. This ride really sums up everything that's good about Galaxy's Edge. It takes something like Star Tours and instead of making you a bystander to the situation, puts you straight into the action, making you fully responsible for what happens on the ride. The ride experience varies depending on what job you get assigned, and if you're wondering how I'd rank the jobs, here you go, but it really helps with the re-rideability factor and makes it feel like a unique experience every time. I've said this in my Galaxy's Edge video, and I'll say it again. There really isn't anything more magical for a Star Wars fan since childhood to get to pull the jump to lightspeed lever in the Millennium freaking Falcon. Once you learn how some of the things they pulled off in this ride were done, specifically the holographic dancers in the dining room, it really makes you appreciate the Imagineering of it. And even all these years later, those same effects look very real and impressive. The amount of originality that went into this ride, from its characters to its dialogue to its setting, is very admirable and creates a whole subculture of lore for Disney adults to freak out over. It may not be the most thrilling, but it certainly is one of the greatest themed rides in the entire park. This ancient mountain is still holding itself together, barely. The structure of this mountain holds so much in such a small space, and you can really feel that when you're on the ride. This ride is always a highlight of my Disneyland trips for its exciting twists and turns. And oh yeah, there's also a terrifying Yeti who I really think was scarier when he didn't move, but I don't know, that might just be nostalgia talking. This ride would probably break the top 3 if it weren't for the fact that it's insanely bumpy. Like, not to an unbearable level, but last time I went on the ride, I actually thought that the bobsled was gonna fly off the rails. Nothing like a little Indiana Jones to wake you up. This ride utilizes some very impressive physical set pieces and effects to create this super fun and exciting ride. I was really debating on whether this one or Matterhorn should get the number 4 spot, but I ultimately decided on Indy because, well, Matterhorn is pretty freaking bumpy, but also because this is one of the only rides in the park that combines incredible theming with exciting thrills. And even the queue for this ride is always so much fun to wait in because there's always stuff to look at left and right. Every time I think about what the best ride in Disneyland is, this one crosses my mind immediately. But not for anything like the theming or the story. All it really is an indoor dark roller coaster set in space. But what holds this ride so high up is the thrill of it. But is the thrill alone enough to justify its number 3 spot? Yes, it is. I find myself trying to go on this ride as many times as possible during my trips, because as a roller coaster, it's one of the best I've ever been on. With the entire room being pitch black, you can't really figure out how fast you're going with your vision. You have to rely on how fast it feels, so what Disney does is manipulate your feelings by putting fans all over the place so that it feels like you're going faster than 35 miles per hour. Oh, and the Michael Giacchino music really helps too. Every single turn is very smooth and direct so that nothing feels uncomfortable or unsafe. It's just a super fun and exciting ride. Like, I will take this over any Magic Mountain ride any day. I love this. And the award for the best themed ride at Disneyland goes to Pirates. In the Disney Parks fandom, there seems to be an ongoing debate on which New Orleans Square ride is better. Personally, I'm on Team Pirates. Everything from the quiet swamp scene at the beginning, the ship battle scene in the middle, and the burning town scene at the end all feel so perfectly themed even 50 years after it first opened. It does the best job at telling its story out of everything at Disneyland. You can look in every direction on this ride and see a new story being told, especially during the town scenes. The ride is over 15 minutes long, which gives you time to relax in this cool air-conditioned room and take in the beauty of this classic story. I can't even begin to describe how happy I get when I enter the room and I smell the bromine water and feel the cool air from the water hit my face, especially on those super hot days. It gets every single element right and is darn close to thematic perfection. We may never get anything better than this at Disneyland, but wait, I say that this ride is as good as Disneyland gets, yet it's only at number 2. Is it possible that Disney has already outdone this thematic masterpiece of a ride? Recently? Yes, which leads us to number 1. I have never in my life been more amazed and brought to a moment of speechlessness over anything as I have with this ride. This experience goes above and beyond the standards set not only by Disney, but by anyone in the theme park industry when it comes to the immersion and realism. The tiny details that they have in order to make this thing feel believable, like having you enter and exit the transport through the same door, making the walls of the Star Destroyer screens so that they can seamlessly make blaster holes appear in the wall, and giving us this very complete and perfectly written story with impeccable dialogue to accompany this spectacle makes this one of the most believable and extraordinary experiences you can ever find from anything in the market of escapism. They use all the latest technology so that they can make this thing as believable as modern technology will allow them to. It has a climax for both its story and its ride, so that both aspects leave you with something to drop your jaw over at the end. Not to mention how you, the guest, are a vital part in this incredibly immersive story, and it all seamlessly exists in Galaxy's Edge, the most immersive place in all of Disneyland. I could honestly go on for hours about how much I love this ride and how perfect it is at everything. And I will, when I decide to make a full video dedicated to this ride. Okay, it probably won't be hours long. But for now, just know that this is the best thing the Walt Disney Company has ever done in their nearly 100-year history, and it may remain that for a very long time. The only thing that isn't cool about this ride is that you gotta go through the Disney lottery system to get on it. But to be fair, it's gotten a lot better recently, and it's not really a problem with the ride, just a problem with the high demand for the ride, which it 100% deserves. The next thing you gotta worry about is the ride breaking down, because that happens quite frequently, unfortunately. So there you have it. That's all the Disneyland rides on a tier list. I may have been a little brutal with some of the rides that I don't like, but at the end of the day, I don't really care that much. I just don't go on those rides. I'd love to know what your ranking of these rides is in the comments. You don't have to do all 55 of them if you don't want. You can do like a top 5 or a top 10. If you want more high quality content like this, please subscribe and share this with your friends. It is much appreciated. Big thanks to LMG Vids and Attractions 360 Degrees for letting me use their footage. I've linked their channels in the description. Go sub to them. Anyways, I'll see ya in Cars Land.